Hi everyone, this is Ashley Jones and I wanted to talk to you about the difference in a native file that is created in your Dime software versus a machine format file. That file may be saved from your Dime software in the format for your embroidery machine, or it may be a file that you've purchased from a digitizer in your machine format to embroider. Okay, so I've got two of the same designs here, and the one on the left is a native file format. Some people also call that the working file, meaning that it is native to Dime software. It's the file that you want to use when you are editing because it contains the most information about the design and can easily be edited, and I'll show you what I mean. So I'm going to ungroup this design for this baseball and ungroup this one as well. Okay, so the complex fill area here is the one that I want to point out specifically because it's the most obvious. So if I click on the complex fill of the native design and I go over here to my sequence view, I'm going to expand, I can see that it says complex fill, and when I click on the complex fill I can see the details in my property. I can change the density, I can change the stitch length, and because my software knows that this is a complex fill, I can also apply different stitch types to this complex fill by converting it to other types of stitches. So by using my icons on my toolbar that are convert to tools like the applique, steel, run in this case, or under my right mouse click convert to, I can change those stitch types here as well. Okay, because it knows that's a complex fill area for this design. Okay, so this design has been saved out as the machine file format, and then I just reopened it in my software. When I click on the complex fill area, notice that it doesn't select the entire area, it just selects it in different parts, and even there's a little piece over here to the side that it's not selecting. And if I look over here in my properties area, or my sequence view, sorry, and it's already expanded for me, notice that this complex fill area has a lot different look to it. It's a combination of runs and satin stitches because that's what the embroidery machine needs to see in order to stitch this file. The embroidery machine doesn't know what a complex fill is. Really, the embroidery machine just knows an X and Y coordinate to make each one of these stitches. So when you have a file that has been saved as your machine format, then it has less information in the file and only what the embroidery machine needs to see. Okay, so that being said, let's say that you have a file that you have purchased from another designer, or it's in the PES file format for whatever reason. Maybe you saved it and lost your working file, and let's say you want to change this stitch type here. So I'm specifically going to use applique because that was a request, and so I'm going to select the complex fill here, and then I'm going to just click one time on the applique button. It knows that that's a complex fill. It knows the area, it knows the outline of that area, the boundary, so it can easily make me an applique stitch. Now, in this case here, what it does not know is that we already had that extra stitch around the outside, which is a steel stitch. And so I actually want to delete that part because then I don't want those stitches on top of one another. So now when I choose applique, my software will give me a placement stitch and a tack down. So you can see both of them there. The outer one, the placement, the inner one, the tack down stitch, and then the last stitch is that satin stitch that covers the edge of my applique. The machine will stop even though those are the same color. The machine, whenever it's saved to the file format for your embroidery machine, it separates those out so that your machine will stop. But when it is the native format, just like the complex fill, when I click on this and I go into my sequence view here, it knows that this is of type applique. So this is an applique object. And that tells the software that an applique gets a placement, a tack down, and then that finishing stitch. In this case, it's the satin stitch around the edge. Now, I'll show you what happens when you save this out. But let's talk about the machine format file here. So the machine format file, remember the software does not know anymore that that was a complex fill. So if I select that and just click to convert to applique, it makes a mess because it doesn't understand exactly what we're wanting, because this has been saved to the machine format with just those X and Y coordinates and our commands for doing the embroidery design on the machine. So I'm going to click my undo key and put that back. So here's what you can do. It also, I clicked it twice accidentally and it brought back my steel stitch here, so I'm just going to press the delete on my keyboard. Okay, so here's what you can do. If you want to convert this file to an applique or some other type of stitch in your dime software, you can create an outline around this area and then delete this complex fill. So let's do that together. So I'm going to select the complex fill area, and then in your software you may have an icon that says create outline, but you can also right mouse click and choose utility and create outline. Now you may have different options here than me. I have all of Dime software, so some of these options are dependent on which software you own. So I'm going to choose create outline, and when we open it up, the distance is set to this 0.08, but you can actually lower that down to, I use the 0.01 a lot, and you can see it kind of hugs that area, but I can also drop that down to 0 in some instances so that it's as close as possible. If you set this to round, it will smooth out as best it can in those areas. And depending on the design, sometimes I can uncheck the include stitches and it will smooth things out. Let's go right back up to 0.01 and see. And now you can see that if I do include stitches, or if I uncheck it and I try to make it 0, it's trying to make an outline under all of those run stitches that are underlays. But if I just bump that up to the 0.1 for the outline, it's not trying to outline every little thing in the center, and that actually makes that a little bit smoother line. Okay, so I'm just going to click OK, and it puts it on my workspace. Now we are going to turn that complex fill into an applique, so I'm going to delete that complex fill area, and I'm also going to delete that satin stitch, because when we turn it into an applique, it's going to have the satin stitch around the edge. Okay, and that run stitch is just the traveling stitch for my laces there. So here is the artwork outline that we created. You can see it's kind of got that little bump in there. And so I know that's the one we created because I can see it on the screen. So I'm going to choose to do undo to put it back, line it up with my baseball. And now that is an artwork outline. I can click to turn that into an applique. And if I watch my slow redraw here, let's get past this first baseball. It's doing the laces first, which we need to adjust, but take a look at the blue part of the design. I get a placement stitch, I get a tack down stitch, and then I get the satin stitch outline. So that is the components of an applique. If I push the plus here, I've got applique object. Now I do want that to stitch before the laces, so I'm going to just click, hold, and drag that into the order for my laces. Okay, now one thing that's happening here, actually two things. So when I put it in order to stitch before my laces, the run stitch is going to stitch over top of my applique. So there's a couple of different things that we can do, and I'll show you that. But you see this little bump in the road here? That was our little bump, and the software is converting that to a satin stitch, but it wasn't perfectly even. Now, the only way to fix that is if you have some other dime software that has the shape tool. That is the way that you can fix that. But here's something else that you could do. So I'm going to just hide this for now, or actually let's do our undo key. And so do you see our satin stitch edge is much smoother? I could turn this outline into the applique again, but instead of that satin stitch around the outline, I can go over here to my properties and choose it to just be a run stitch. So then I can just move that satin stitch along that top edge. So here over my sequence view, click, drag, move that down, and then now it's going to hide it. And because that was digitized but earlier, not from our applique, it's already a nice smooth stitch, and so that would make a really nice clean edge. So you could do that. You still want to move your applique here in position so that it's the first thing that stitches. So if we do our slow redraw again, let's get past the first baseball, and then you can see here now it's going to stitch a placement stitch, a tack down stitch, and then the next thing it's going to do is the run stitch, but because that's just a run stitch and it stitches along the outside, then you can still cover that with that satin stitch along the edge. So then your laces stitch, and then your finishing stitch, which in this case was from the previous version of our design. Okay, so now let me go back to the applique if we do that finishing stitch and talk about putting our laces in the right order. Okay, so I'm actually going to delete that steel stitch again, or that satin that was around the edge. Go back up in my sequence view here to the applique, which is this object right here, and if I push the plus I can see that it's applique, and then I can change settings. I'm going to put that back to the satin and click apply, and now we can see that our run stitch that is around the edge of our baseball runs around. Now this one is separate, so I could just simply delete that and it wouldn't be over top of my stitches, but notice how my laces are still the last thing that stitches, and I can't put it in between my placement and my tack down. So with your applique, you can right mouse click and choose break up path, and that will separate out your run stitch and the applique component. So then I can actually move this up to stitch before that finished satin stitch. So let's watch that again. Slow redraw. I'm going to skip the first design, get on over to our next one, and you can see we've got the placement stitch here, but I'm missing the run stitch for the tack down for some reason. So there it is. Don't know why that tack down after that, so we need to break up our applique again. So I'm going to do a right mouse click, and I don't have break up. Now let's look at our properties here and see if I've got an issue. So there's my issue. So I've got the tack down set to none. Okay, so to me, it's best to undo to make sure that you go back to the applique component. And I'm going to push the plus. There's my applique. I'm going to change my tack down stitch to be my run stitch tack down. You can also do the tackle, twill, or the zigzag. Click apply. And now let's break that up again because we want to put our laces before our satin stitch. Right mouse click, break up path. Now notice that I get 3 different objects. I've got the run stitch placement stitch, the run stitch tack down, and the applique. So I'm going to click, drag that, so now I should have a placement stitch, a tack down stitch, my laces will stitch, and then the finishing stitch around the edge. And if I want to change that to white, I can just simply right mouse click on my color chip to change that to a white color. Now the other thing that I noticed here is how far our laces go underneath our satin stitch there. So what I might do is select them and just simply resize them so that they're just barely under the edge. I don't want to see that red peeking out from my my satin stitch there. So, and then you've converted a design that was not a native file to an applique. Hope this helps.